All right, friends, you are in for a treat. I'm here with a new friend of mine, a remarkable 12-year-old, and we're going to talk about his love for apologetics, music, and I have some questions for him about his generation, which is called Gen Z. Now, I first met Nahoa live through a colleague of mine at Biola, fellow professor, emailed me and he said, hey, there's this young man, he's 12, he has some questions for you about apologetics. I thought, well, that's interesting. And then I read a little bit further and he said he read a part of your doctoral dissertation and has questions for you. And I thought, are you kidding me? This 12-year-old read my dissertation. He wants to know truth that much. Nahoa, you and I Zoomed last week. You asked some great questions. I thought, you know what? I bet my audience would be interested in hearing from a 12-year-old who just loves apologetics and is trying to follow the Lord today in different ways. So Nahoa, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you.
So let me start by just asking you about yourself. What would you want viewers to know about who you are?
My name is Nahoa Life. I'm 12 years old. I'm in middle school, 7th grade, and I love apologetics. I started doing apologetics about 2 years ago, and I love music. I've been doing music for longer than I can remember, literally. So yeah, it's just an honor to be here.
Well, that's awesome. Your parents sent me an email and mentioned that your love for music started early, and we're going to get into some of that. But let's talk about, does Nahoa mean something? I'm curious. It's a unique name.
My mom is from Hawaii, and Nahoa is a Hawaiian name, and it means bold and brave, or courageous. So yeah, I like my name.
I love that, by the way. Do you know which apostle in the Bible, his name also means bold and courageous, is Andrew, the brother of Peter.
Mm.
Andrew means that. My favorite verse is Hebrews 10:39, which says, for we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who believe and are saved. So that is something you can live out and are named after. What about Life? Life is an interesting last name.
Um, well, life is my middle name, and Nahoa Life sounds really cool, and I love I love my name, so I made that kind of my music name and what I go by on social media and all that stuff.
Well, it is a cool name, and we're going to get into some of your social media following, but let's start with a lot of my audience follows and is interested in apologetics, and some have already said they want to know how you got into apologetics. So you said this was 2 years ago, so you must have been about 10 years old. Why would a 10-year-old who's often playing maybe baseball or video games get into apologetics?
Well, how I remember it was I was just kind of bored, and I was homeschooled. Like it was before the coronavirus, and I was already homeschooled, and and I was kind of bored, and I had to read a book. So my mom was interested in apologetics a while ago, and she had a bunch of books on the bookshelf. So I just picked up one that looked interesting, uh, and it was called No God But One: Allah or Jesus by Nabil Qureshi.
Wow.
And that I read that, super intriguing. First time I realized there's evidence for Christianity. It's the first time I ever learned anything about apologetics. And from there I kind of decided to learn more about Jesus and learn more about God. And yeah, that's kind of what started it all.
So you were a Christian before you saw that book,
Yeah.
obviously. So that book by Nabil Qureshi, who is a friend of mine, besides there being evidence for God, was it his story? Was it his conversion? What was it that captured you about that book in particular?
Well, I've always liked learning. I've always been kind of academic. So, I've always been a Christian, and realizing that there's actual reasons to think that there's actual academic reasons to believe in Jesus and stuff like that. That itself intrigued me. The
Hmm.
the evidence, the just learning about um, Christianity from an objective standpoint. You can't really be objective, but you're trying to be as objective as possible. That itself is what interested me the most.
Well, it's a fascinating story, being a former Muslim, coming to faith, and
Mm.
what it cost him. Remarkable book. That's wonderful. Now, since then, Tell me some of the other books that you have read in apologetics.
Um, so, all right. So one of my favorite books that I've read is How Reason Can Lead to God by Dr. Joshua Rasmussen. That, that's a great book. He gives a super original argument for the existence of God. And I really like that one. Um, I read Cold Case Christianity by J. Warner Wallace.
Great.
And yeah, that was a really good one too. Um, I read Outgrowing. Well, I listened to it on Audible. Outgrowing God by Richard Dawkins. That was very interesting.
Okay, now let
And
me stop you for a second. Did your parents have any concern of you reading a book by a leading atheist who's has stated in his books that he tries to talk people out of their faith? Were your parents like, go for it? Were they concerned? Or did you just kind of sneak that apologetics book and read it?
um, I don't remember them, ever telling me like, "Oh, don't do that," or "Oh, don't learn that. The Bible says this, so you can't read that." They were always super supportive of,
Hmm.
me learning about apologetics, and it was probably interesting for them to see their 11-year-old reading a super atheist book, but yeah, it was a good book. Um, yeah.
So I want to come back if there's any other books that you've read, but tell us what you thought about Dawkins. You kind of described it as interesting and being a good book. What was interesting and what did you enjoy about it?
Well, first of all, it was the only book I've read, or no, it was the first book or first just anything by an atheist. Like I've never seen other perspectives. So that
Hmm.
was, the first thing that was interesting about it was that it was the first book, atheist book I read.
Okay.
Also, he he talked a lot about the gospels, or he talked about so many things. He talked about the gospels, about evolution, about the Old Testament, and I hadn't been doing apologetics for a long time, so I didn't really know how to respond to anything he said.
Hmm.
Now I can kind of see through it. I can kind of say, no, that's wrong. Look at this source. But at the time, it really shook my faith. I didn't
Hmm.
I didn't I wasn't as confident. I definitely wasn't as confident in Christianity after reading that book. But it kind of reading that book inspired me to learn even more about apologetics. And in that way, I guess I'm kind of thankful that I read that book.
That's awesome. Would you recommend that other people read that book? Or would you have caution for other young people engaging somebody like Dawkins' book?
I would recommend to everyone that they would see
Hmm.
different perspectives. They would see the best people who agree with you and the best on the other side. And but yeah, when you should always be cautious, and you should always think about, like, don't just accept everything you hear, because you could read a Christian book or hear a Christian message, and even then that it can be incorrect sometimes. So you can't just absorb everything you hear and read like a sponge. But you do you it is it is good to look at other perspectives.
I think that's wise. Good for you. Now, there's a question that popped through that says, have you read C.S. Lewis? If so, which ones? And do you have a favorite by C.S. Lewis?
I have started reading The Problem of Pain by C.S. Lewis. I'm reading it right now. It's really cool, really interesting. I've learned some awesome stuff. And I know in our last conversation, you recommended Mere Christianity by C.S.
Mm-hmm.
Lewis, but honestly, I haven't read, anything from C.S. Lewis other than the beginning of one of his books.
Well, that's great. He wrote The Problem of Pain. I believe he was in his 40s, and he's intellectually talking about why there's pain and suffering. And then he wrote A Grief Observed about 20 years later, after he lost his wife and personally experienced suffering. So I'd encourage you to kind of read both of those together. One is experiential, one is intellectual,
Mm.
and kind of talk through with your parents about it. And any other books? You mentioned 3 or 4 books earlier. Are there any that I missed that you have read that you found helpful about apologetics?
Yeah, so there's this one book, another atheist book, Why Evolution is True. by Dr. Jerry A. Coyne. He's an evolutionary biologist. That that actually completely convinced me of evolution. Like
Wow.
I started off a young Earth creationist, then I became kind of agnostic about the age of the Earth, and then after reading that book, I became full on uh, Darwinist,
Okay.
old Earth. Yeah. Now looking back, I'm like, why? But why did I do that? But and now I don't really know. Like looking into it more with more recent studies that have been found, more recent discoveries, which took place after he wrote the book that he couldn't even have known about. They kind of refute a lot of the evidence he gave.
Hmm.
So right now, I don't know what on evolution. Yeah.
I, I I think that's smart and that's fair. Do you feel like if you believed evolution, would that threaten your faith in the way when you read Dawkins' book and that was unsettling to you?
Uh, no, because well, it depends on what you mean by evolution. So if you mean, hmm, I don't think the idea that species change over time and that every living thing on Earth is related, has a common ancestor. I don't think that conflicts with the Christian faith, and I can explain why in just a second. But but if you're talking about Darwinism, the evolution that's taught in schools and taught as a as a standard, you have to learn about this in textbooks, and the idea that random variation and natural selection produces the diversity of life, that conflicts with the Christian, that conflicts with Christianity because it's random. It had, God isn't involved in the process in any way. But if it's just evolution, like species changing, then that could be an intelligent, uh, a process which is intelligently designed. Intelligently? That's not a word, I
Sure.
think.
Sure.
But um, but one reason I don't think the idea that evolution conflicts with uh, Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 is because Genesis seems to, or those first three chapters, Genesis 1, 2, and 3, it seems to be metaphorical. The author doesn't
Okay.
seem like he intended it all to be literal. And Dr. William Lane Craig has a series of lectures on this topic, and it's really good. Like, that series is called Life and Biodiversity. So that's a great series where he talks about Genesis is more metaphoric, mythical, rather than a detailed historical account.
So your primary concern with believing evolution is if it's a blind, random, unguided process, that would
Right.
conflict. But if somehow God is guiding the process and involved, then that could be reconciled with Genesis and it wouldn't concern you.
Right. And I think, like, right now where I'm at with evolution is I think probably evolution is true. That's what I think. Species do change
Okay.
over time, and all living things, or most living things at least, are related and share a common ancestor. But I don't think Darwinism is true. I think there's really good evidence against Darwinism.
Very fair. Did I miss any other books that you that have been interesting to you? You mentioned Jerry Coyne, Dawkins. Were there any other atheist or skeptical or Muslim writers that aren't Christians that you read?
No, I really want to read more atheist books, Muslim, Jewish books, and agnostic books too. Um, but I have so many books on the bookshelf that I haven't read yet. But another book that I'm reading right now, it's super awesome. It's Knowledge and Christian Belief by Dr. Alvin Plantinga.
Yeah.
It's a I think an easier to read version of like another book he has, and it's really awesome. Like I can relate to everything he says in the book. Super well written, well thought out. I love that book.
So tell me
Um,
one thing you like about Plantinga, who's clearly one of the leading Christian
mhm.
philosophers in the world. What's one thing when you're reading that was like, oh, that makes sense. I agree with that. That was interesting to you.
Well, I love when he talks about faith. Like what is faith? He has multiple chapters on this, and he says faith is uh, one part of faith is a knowledge of God's goodness and a belief in the in the magnificent scheme of salvation that God has created. But it also concerns your affections, what you love and hate, what you desire. And when you have faith, when the Holy Spirit instills faith into you, then you have a desire to love and please and worship God, and you understand the great truths of the gospel. And and I feel like ever since I've been doing apologetics, I think the Holy Spirit really has instilled in me a very faith, and I have found myself desiring to please and love God more. And I'm just, I'm so thankful for that.
Well, that's awesome. I'm glad you're reading some skeptics and other books, but also
Hmm.
people like Plantinga.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Sounds like you've read some of William Lane Craig, or at least listened to
Oh yeah.
his series. Tell us some of his works that you've read and what you think about him.
He, all right. So I read most. I think I've read most of his book, Reasonable Faith. Probably, his most popular book. And in there, he talks about well, my favorite parts are when he talks about the existence of God, arguments for the existence of God, and
Okay.
the resurrection of Jesus. I love his case for the resurrection of Jesus. Um, and yeah, I think I really love pretty much all of his work. There's some things that I would disagree with him on, but yeah, I really respect Dr. William Lane Craig.
Now you've got me curious. What would you disagree with Dr. Craig on? It's okay too. He's the kind of person who would love somebody of your age or any age to have a disagreement with him and share why. So what's maybe an issue or two you just see a little bit differently than he does?
Well, uh, I would love to like understand more, like really what he thinks about this. But from what I've read and his blogs and stuff, it seems like he doesn't think abstract objects exist. He doesn't think numbers or propositions actually exist. And to me, that's like, and he says, I can say the Earth has one moon without saying the number one exists.
Mm-hmm.
That that to me seems very very odd. And but the most important thing is the propositions. He doesn't think propositions objectively exist. And and I think that's contradictory to say there are no propositions. It's self-defeating. So in the same way, you can't say there is no truth. Well, that's is that true? Like the statement
Hmm.
there is no truth, it assumes there is truth. So a proposition is a statement that can either be true or false. So if you say there are no propositions, you are stating something that's either true or false. So to say there are no propositions presupposes the existence of propositions. I mean, that seems like the case to me. So yeah.
That's very fair. Now, you mentioned you have read a lot of his book, Reasonable Faith, and you appreciate his case for the resurrection. Let's
Hmm.
talk about Jesus a little bit. Obviously, he's one of the leading scholars on Jesus today. What is it about his case for the resurrection that kind of resonates with you?
So, all right. So I think the best way to answer that is to first kind of talk about my favorite case for the resurrection.
Okay.
My favorite case is in two parts, and it goes like the first part talks about evidence, just evidence, not drawing any conclusions, and the second part is drawing the conclusion. What does this evidence support? What's the best explanation of it? And the first part, the evidence that I would love to give is the empty tomb, right? The fact that the his tomb was found empty, and the fact that many people believed they Jesus appeared to them alive after his death. Those two facts, I think, have so much evidence to support them. I've really enjoyed actually reading the documents from ancient history, seeing what was actually written, and it's just been super awesome. But there's those two facts: empty tomb, and people believe Jesus appeared to them. Then what's the best explanation? Well, then you would narrow it down to the resurrection. Hallucination can't explain it because hallucination can't explain the empty tomb, and it wasn't some big lie because they believed it. They actually were willing to die for this belief.
Mm.
So that's my favorite case. And his case is very, very similar. It's also in two parts: first evidence, then explanation. And in the evidence, he talks about the appearances, they believed it. He talks about the empty tomb, and then he talks about the beliefs even more. And my favorite thing about his whole case is his argument for the empty tomb. When he debates people on the resurrection of Jesus, he always blows them away with the empty tomb. And it's just awesome.
So you've watched a lot of debates too, haven't you?
Yeah.
Tell me some of the debates that you've enjoyed watching.
Um, I liked his debate with Dr. Richard Carrier. Dr. Richard Carrier seemed very knowledgeable. He is an atheist historian, and he doesn't think that Jesus rose from the dead, clearly, and he doesn't think Jesus was a real person. I've seen his lectures on that too. I watched them on YouTube. He's pretty good. Then Dr. William Lane Craig comes, and he gives the argument for the empty tomb. And Dr. Richard Dr. Richard Carrier responds to pretty much everything, but he can't take down the empty tomb argument, and that's just yeah.
So it sounds like have you read N.T. Wright's work on the resurrection yet?
No, I really want to. I've seen
Okay.
lots of apologists citing his work, but I haven't actually read it.
Now that's about a 700-800 page book I use in my grad class on the resurrection. But his basic approach is he argues for two facts: the empty tomb and the appearances. So Craig will often give four, Habermas and Lacona sometimes three or four, but it's N.T. Wright who uniquely approaches it the way that you do. So
Mm,
when you get a chance, I think you might enjoy his book, The Resurrection of the Son of God, because he approaches it that way. Um,
mm.
have you seen any other debates? Tell me any other debates you watched that you found interesting.
Um, I saw well, Dr. William Lane Craig's debate with Dr. Christopher Hitchens. He's a PhD, right? Dr. Christopher Hitchens.
Christopher Hitchens was not a PhD. He was a
Oh, okay.
journalist.
So Dr. William Lane Craig versus Christopher Hitchens. That was a really interesting one. I didn't really like watching it because it kind of annoyed me a little bit. Um, Dr. William Lane Craig would give arguments and arguments for the existence of the Christian God, specifically God in general, but specifically the Christian God. And then Christopher Hitchens wouldn't respond to any of it. He would talk about how religion is poisonous and terrible, and then he would say, "I'm so glad there's no evidence for any of this. Thank
Hmm.
you." And he didn't respond to anything Dr. Craig says. So, and there's lots of stuff that was kind of like in the debate.
I was actually at that debate because it was at Biola
Mm,
where I teach, and it was packed
mm,
out. There was energy, and it's been seen millions of times online. So it sounds like when you watch a debate, you're paying attention to the arguments, but also whether or not people respond and how they carry themselves in a debate. Is that true? How you watch these debates?
yeah, yeah, and I definitely love how Dr. William Lane Craig debates. He always has everything prepared. His opening statement, his rebuttals, his closing. It's always very structured, and he always responds to the opposing side's views. It's really really cool.
So, what do you think are the best arguments for the existence of God? You've talked about the resurrection, but if a friend asked you, or you were maybe an online debate or discussion, and someone said, Nahoa, why do you believe in God? What is the arguments that you would give?
Well, first of all, I don't really believe in God because I know of arguments for the existence of God. I don't believe on the basis of this evidence. I think just the Holy Spirit has allowed me to know that it's true.
Mm,
And that's also what Dr. Alvin Plantinga was writing about. So again, I related to that. He's
good.
like, Christians don't always believe off of arguments. They could know it, but that's not why they believe. So that's the case for me. But if I was talking to just pretty much to anyone, I would give the Kalam cosmological argument. probably most popular argument other than look at the trees. um, and I think, oh, and for those of you don't who don't know it, the Kalam cosmological argument is basically divided up into four parts. It's one, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Two, the universe began to exist. So three, this is the conclusion, the universe has a cause. And then the fourth part is kind of saying this cause is what we call God. This is what we mean when we say God. And I think each part of the argument has really good scientific and philosophical reasons for accepting each part of the argument. And that, I think that's a really successful, sound argument.
That's awesome. That makes sense. Again, that's one of the ones that William Lane Craig has really developed. Do you have a follow up, like the moral argument or argument from beauty? Have you thought about that, or are there other arguments? Which other ones resonate with you?
Well, probably my favorite argument. I wouldn't give this to someone. I wouldn't, like, if someone says, what's an argument, what's some evidence, I wouldn't give this to them because it's really weird and kind of complicated. But it's the modal ontological argument.
Okay.
And I think it's a really underrated argument. I think, first of all, lots of people on YouTube spend 6 minutes debunking a millennium of philosophical thought. They're debunking it, I guess. And, and then what apologists themselves, I think a lot don't, they don't, I don't know, I just feel like it's kind of underrated. And I really, really like that one. But a follow up to the Kalam cosmological argument would be maybe the argument from the fine tuning of the universe.
Okay.
That seems like a pretty easy to understand and sound argument too. I like the moral argument a lot. Just it's kind of hard for people to separate the idea of, like when you present it to them, they often think, so you're saying atheists can't be moral? You're saying you need to believe in God to, to be good? That's not what it says. That's not what the argument says. That's not what any apologists that I know say. But yeah.
That's great.
Oh, and for the argument from beauty, I really like that one. And I know you have argued, like, probably the first video I saw from your channel was the argument from beauty.
Oh.
And I think it's really good. I ordered some books on beauty, and I'm really enjoying looking into that.
That is an area that could be developed much more in the world of apologetics. So given that you love music, and we're going to talk about that, and love to think, maybe that's something that would interest you down the road to develop. Let me go back to what you described as the modal ontological argument, since that's one of your favorite. If there's someone in our audience that goes, gosh, I don't know what that is. I realize this is a tough argument, but could you explain how you understand just the best you can do essentially to someone who's like, I'm not even sure what the ontological argument is?
Okay. So, this one, well, my formulation of it, the way I would present it, it's different than, Dr. William Lane Craig's version or even the original version. But it would go like this. If it is possible that a perfect being exists, then a perfect being does exist. That's part one. Two, it is possible that a perfect being exists, so the conclusion follows, a perfect being exists. And that's kind of the structure of it. And most people can intuitively see that premise 2 is true. It is possible. Maybe there is a perfect being. Being with perfect goodness, power, knowledge. Maybe it's possible, I guess. Most people would agree with that. And then the first premise, if it's possible that there's a perfect being, then such a being exists. That one is the premise that's the most complicated. But I think there are really good reasons to think that, and I think we could even give a logical proof, kind of like a mathematical proof of this first premise. So I think that's good.
So I think the second one, you're right. The second premise would be easily accepted by most people, but the first one, give a simple defense that if it's give a simple defense of the first premise. I know you could go into mathematical principles. I don't want to get too lost on this, but why would the possibility follow the actuality?
All right. So in that case, I think it's good to define some terms. Um, so, okay. So first, I'll explain like what a possible world is.
Okay.
So in philosophy, there's something called a possible world. It's basically a way that reality could be, a way that reality might have been. It's not, a possible world doesn't refer to a planet or a universe or something. It's just it's possible that that reality could have been that way. So, there's not leprechauns in the real world, but there could be, I guess. It's possible. So there's leprechauns in some possible world.
Okay.
Okay, that's what a possible world is. Um, then here's a definition of possible. If something is possible in philosophy, that means it's true in some possible world. So leprechauns are possible. They could exist in some possible world. If something is possible means at least one. So it could exist in 5 possible worlds, 1, 70, who knows. Necessary means true in every possible world. No matter what hypothetical situation you give, it's true in that. It's true in that world. And 3 means actual. I mean, yeah, the definition of actual. If something actually is true, then it's true in the real world. Okay, in reality. So a perfect being would be a being that has all good qualities. It would have all great properties. And necessity is a great property, right? It would be better if a perfect being had necessity rather than something else. So, if it's possible that a perfect being exists, that means it's possible that a necessary being exists. And pretty much every philosopher and logician, people who study logic, they agree that if it's possible for a necessary thing to exist, then that necessary thing does exist. And that's where the mathematics comes into play. But philosophers, this is pretty widely accepted. A perfect being is a necessary thing. So if it's possible for a perfect being to exist, then it really does exist. And this is super uncontroversial in philosophical circles.
Nahoa, that was a wonderful explanation. I've got to give you full props for studying. Think about this. There's one guy who goes, "I'm 39 years old and he understands the ontological argument better than I do." So, way to go. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a whole bunch of people
No.
just going, "Wow, good thinking, way to go." This kid would win a debate with Richard Dawkins. So you're doing awesome. You'll get a chance to see a lot of these later. We come back to. So for those of you listening, we are here with future Biola student Nahoa Life. We'd love to have you at Biola someday in any program, Apologetics Theology, talking about his love for apologetics. And I have a few more questions for you. Then we're going to jump into your generation, talk about the music that you create as well. Now, you shared earlier that your basis for belief in God is the Holy Spirit speaking to you, and the arguments come after that. So do you engage in discussions with skeptics and non-believers about the arguments, or do you just say, pray, read the Bible? How would you interact with someone who doesn't believe?
Well, okay, first of all, I've been. All right, there's 3 main things. First of all, I've been doing apologetics. Like, I kind of started around the time COVID got started. Like, that's when I really started trying to understand. So, I haven't had the opportunity to talk to a lot of skeptics and stuff.
Okay.
Um, yeah, but second, when I say I believe because of the Holy Spirit and not really on the basis of any arguments, that's something that I'm learning about. That's what this book I'm reading is talking about. That's what Dr. William Lane Craig talks about. I'm I'm not 100% sure like that's really what's going on, but I'm pretty sure it seems right to me like that.
Okay.
So how would I do that? Well, I have conversed, and I've had some conversations with people who don't believe, and somehow we talked about evolution, then we talked about Jesus, and I kind of gave a resurrection argument. And it was a really good, productive conversation. I was happy to share all the apologetic stuff I was learning about, and I would like to think that I've I spoke, I gave a defense with gentleness and respect,
Good.
like 1 Peter 3:15 says. So yeah, but I don't know if it's very effective to talk to a non-believer and say, "Oh, you're broken and wicked. You're sinful. You should just believe in Jesus. Then you'll go to heaven." Like, no matter how theologically accurate that might be, it's not very helpful. It's not encouraging or inspiring in any way. It doesn't demonstrate the love of God in any way. So, I think that's, in some circumstances, I guess that could be a loving way to share the gospel, but I don't think that's very effective.
Well, that's great that you're distinguishing between theological truths and the method of doing this effectively. I think that's a smart way to approach it. Nahoa, can you show us one or two or three books that you're reading right now, or are they in another room?
I mean, they're just in that room, so I could get them, or
You know what? Just tell us so you don't have to jump out and go to another room. What's one or
oh,
two you're reading right now?
well, I'm reading "Why Does God Allow Evil" by Dr. Clay Jones.
All right.
I'm reading, like I said, "Knowledge and Christian Belief" by Dr. Alvin Plantinga, and I just finished reading a book about free will from Dr. Sam Harris. So I'll probably read a book from a philosopher who thinks there is free will. The last book I
Mm.
read was about how there's no free will. So I have a book on the bookshelf about, it's called "Why Free Will Exists" by Dr. Christian List. And so again, seeing both perspectives, both sides of the argument. So yeah, those are the three that I'm kind of reading and about to read at the moment.
So you believe you've experienced the Holy Spirit and you think the evidence points towards Christianity. Do you have any questions that are just kind of like bothering you or you're wrestling through, or you just kind of take it issue by issue, like evil, free will, and just kind of grow as you go?
There's some that, I mean, I don't even expect to have all the answers to all my questions, but there's always, some of the main questions about salvation and about natural evil that kind of stay there, but they don't really cause me to doubt or anything.
Okay.
They don't make me consider, ooh, is everything I'm believing a lie? It's not that powerful for me right now.
That's good. That's good. You grow and you learn and you ask questions and keep moving forward. I think that's really smart. So, do your friends have an interest in apologetics? Like, do you tell them about this excited and they're like, let's go play basketball? Or do they want to hear? Like, what's this like with your other friends who are also in seventh grade?
Well, my friends they're really nice guys, super supportive, great listeners. So, I'm thankful for that. And and some way or another, we always end up talking about something like evolution or Jesus or something
Okay.
like that. And and I think if you don't like get crazy technical or use, unfamiliar terminology or anything like that, then you could have a really, fun conversation. And that's kind of how my conversations with my friends have been about apologetics. They're not super crazy into it, like spending all the time on it, but it's interesting to hear a scientific approach to faith.
Hmm. Do you want to be an apologist, or are you just asking these questions because you love it and it interests you and you'll figure that out in a decade?
Um, well, I did apologetics originally, honestly, because I was kind of bored and I had to read a book. Then I was like, this is really cool. So I did apologetics because it was interesting. Then I read the Richard Dawkins book, and I did apologetics to kind of save my faith, I guess. And then now I do it because it's just really, really enjoyable learning
Hmm.
about these big questions. I don't really plan to be an apologist, I think I'd want to be a musician, but
Okay.
I think I'll always love doing apologetics and keep a lot of these truths that I'm learning, forever.
Well, the good news is you got a lot of time to figure this out and balance it. So you are exactly where you should be right now, playing music, hanging with your friends, reading books, asking questions. I mean, I can't even tell you how many comments there are just to people that want you to be encouraged that what you're doing is unique. Now, when we were getting ready for this interview, you mentioned a question to ask you, and I was like, of course I'll ask that. And I didn't write it down and I forgot what it was. I think it was a question about your generation. You wanted to make sure that I asked you. Remind me what that question was.
Oh, it was about like how could we make apologetics more interesting to Generation Z?
Exactly. So that is such a good question. How can we make apologetics more interesting to Gen Z, to your generation?
So I think first of all, everybody really learns differently at different paces, and in school it kind of seems like it's kind of overlooked. You have one curriculum for a class of 30 or more students. It doesn't seem like the greatest thing. So it's kind of individual and personal, but some of the best topics in apologetics. First of all, some of the best topics in apologetics to talk about with generation people around my age, from my generation, is I think stuff relating to evolution, because
Hmm.
they're learning about it. They're constantly learning. Oh, this is a fact. No one disputes this in the scientific community. This is definite. And stuff relating to science and God. So first with evolution, they go to school 5 days a week, and they hear you're a product of blind, random, mutations and accidents, and evolution happened, and the Earth is 4 billion years old. And then you go to Sunday school, and you hear the Earth is 6,000 years old, and the pastors will joke around about how stupid evolution is, and you get these two conflicting things, and when really there doesn't have to be a conflict. So I think shedding light on that, and we talked about this a little earlier, that you can be a Christian without accepting, without like dismissing all of science. You can do that, and evolution and Christianity don't have to conflict. So that's one thing. Second, with science and God, people my age, and I think of every age, are taught to respect and value science. And
Hmm.
it's, I think, maybe the one subject in school that isn't, super lame, because people every once in a while do a science experiment, they watch videos, they're learning about the world, and that's kind of exciting. So if you talk about how scientific discoveries point to God, how even evolutionary discoveries point to God, an intelligent designer, and that could be really, really intriguing to a lot of people. And the final thing about that is like reading stuff. Like, I think one reason you shouldn't give people, how do I say this? It's like you don't, I think a really practical and effective way to communicate the gospel and talk about apologetics in a fun way is to watch videos and do presentations
Good.
and look at things for yourself, instead of being given, a textbook like they are always in school.
That's smart. I think that's not only really good teaching, but it's also paying attention to the questions that this generation is asking. One more for you, then I'll jump to music. Do you look into like ethical issues that people debate today, like say abortion or the environment or the LGBTQ conversation is huge? Do you spend time thinking that, or is it more like historical Jesus and the science type topics?
Well, it's both. It's my main focus is about the last thing you said about the historical Jesus, evidence for God, philosophical arguments. But I have thought about um, abortion, and I haven't really thought about climate change or anything.
Okay.
But but yeah. But I don't think I have. Uh, yeah.
That's great. That's all you got to say. So, what advice would you give? There's probably a lot of parents that are listening. We have some pastors, one 14-year-old and a couple kids around, but it's probably mostly adults that are watching this. Do you have any advice that comes to mind for them to kind of equip or train your generation?
I'd say one, be open to learning new things, I guess. Be open to maybe changing some of the, I think this is the right term, preconceived notions that you have about reality. Um, because, in church a lot, and in stuff like um, in I guess Christian circles, I hear a lot of, like I said, just you know sarcastic remarks about evolution, dismissing it or something like that. And I think evolution especially is super misunderstood. Not non-Christians are often thought of by Christians as, oh, not hopeful,
Hmm.
immoral and stuff like that. That's not right. So yeah, so I think, be open to changing your mind about certain things.
I think that's wonderful, wonderful advice. I want to affirm that I love that you care about ideas, but you care about the gospel and the way you talk about other people. Someone made a comment earlier when I asked you how you disagree with William Lane Craig, which could feel like an intimidating idea, someone with two PhDs, a leading philosopher in the world. And you said, I want to learn more, but here's something I understand. It doesn't make sense to me. A very generous, I think, respectful way of doing that. So I just want to affirm you're doing so awesome in there. Well, let's talk about your music. I have so many more apologetic questions that we can have you back if you want to and talk about some of these issues again. Maybe take a specific issue and go into a little bit more depth for your thoughts. But tell us about your love for music. Your dad emailed me and said I think you were 4 or 5 when you really started engaging some of these. So tell us about your love for music.
Yeah, it was about 4 or 5 when I started. Uh, well, now I sing, I rap, I write, um, and I play the piano, and it's super fun right now. I love creating music, writing music, then going into the studio. This is our studio here. We take, adjust the microphone a little bit and open up the program, and then we just record music that we've made. And it's super fun. And it all kind of started about 8 years ago, 7 to 8 years ago, when I was just, I had a cheese stick in my hand and I was just freestyling. And, you know, it, music has always been a part of the family. My dad was a musician, my mom was a poet,
Hmm.
and music is always playing on car rides in the background. Just, yeah.
So tell us about the kind of music that you create or you love. Yeah, let's talk about what you create.
So, I want to create music that I would enjoy listening to, that's fun to make, and that that's not just, feels good but not lyrical at all. Like, I want it to have meaning. I want it to feel good too, but to also, have uh impactful lyrics, and just, dope lyrics too. So, and I want to create music that I would like to hear, and that I think a lot of other people would like to hear and would be inspired by. And the music that I like is R&B, pop,
Hmm.
soul, gospel. Those are like the four major genres of music, and that's kind of that. My music is a blend of that, and hip hop, of course, hip hop.
Do you have a favorite band or two that you follow, Christian or not, that you just think create good quality, beautiful music?
Yeah. So, well, there's Stevie Wonder, first of all. He and Tori Kelly. I think they're both Christian, and I just love their music. Um, and then um, well, J. Cole, he's not a Christian. I don't know actually. I don't know what he believes, but his music, I just really love his music. He's a rapper and a producer. Um, yeah.
That's awesome. Now, what is the creative process like for you? Because I know how to write books and blogs, but I don't have a clue how to make music. Walk me through what this process looks like for you.
It changes kind of every time. It changes from song to song, but more or less, what usually happens is first we have a beat. Um,
Hmm.
Usually like a friend of the family. Uh, dad. My dad was involved in the music industry and stuff, so he has some connections, and his friends are musical, and friends of the family give us beats. They give us songs to work with, and then we usually one of us will think of a concept first, like what is the song about, or maybe a title, or we could even just be mumbling like melodies and gibberish, and then a phrase will just pop out, and that'll
Huh.
be the title of the song. And it changes at the beginning, but once you have either the concept or the title or the first words of the song down, then the rest is you just kind of write, you listen to the beat, and and yeah, from there it kind of goes smoothly.
And it flows. That's awesome. Tell some people have asked, you have a YouTube channel now. What you sent me, or your dad sent me, you have a website and you have an Instagram that people can follow. Tell us first about the website.
um the website has a little bio about me and about some of the songs that I've released. um and Instagram. It's just Instagram, and I have a YouTube channel too. All of it, the website, the all of my social media stuff. It's just Nahoa Life. So my YouTube channel is called Nahoa Life. All of it. Um, yeah.
In the description below, we have a link to the website and to the Instagram. I don't think I included the YouTube channel, but those of you following
Mm.
me, follow this young, exceptional man and just like and support what he's doing. Nahoa, this is just absolutely fantastic. I knew after our conversation that we were going to have a good discussion, but I got to tell you, even blew me away on a couple levels. Number one, your thoughtfulness about these issues, that you could explain the ontological argument. Actually, I'm blown away that that even one of your favorite arguments. But then also that you're not threatened by ideas different than your own, and you're just trying to think through, how do I take these ideas and communicate them to people who see the world differently. I think that is great and awesome. Now, did I miss anything you wanted to tell our audience about the music or about apologetics or just about you that I should have asked, or did that cover it?
uh, no, I think you did a good job.
Oh, my job was easy. I threw softballs and you knocked him out of the park. So again, to our friends, we are
Thank
with future Biola student, Nahoa Life,
you.
apologist in the making, doing music. Oh, I did have a last question. When you approach music, is there a faith component to it? Is it just fun? How do you think about that as a Christian when you approach music?
Hmm. Well, first of all, it's not. My Christian isn't gospel. I mean, my music isn't uh, gospel music. It's not like overtly Christian music. I mention God, a few times, but it's just mainly music that I would like to listen to, and and that's inspiring and encouraging too. I don't want to do anything God wouldn't approve of, and I don't do anything inappropriate or anything that's
Hmm.
just stupid. So, but no, there's not really a faith component when I'm making the music.
Okay. I think that's awesome. Well, there was a comment that just said this was a great live video. A friend of mine, Dr. Jonathan McClatchy, you maybe have come across his work with Intelligent Design, Historical Jesus. He just said, here's a great comment for you. He said, this young man is very inspiring. I look forward to seeing him contending for the faith in years to come. There's just a whole bunch of people on here. So, hey, Noah, you are awesome. Your family is awesome. I was looking forward to this, and I got to tell you, it's even better than I expected it was going to be. So, those of you
Thank
watching
you.
this enjoyed it. Give us a thumbs up. Give Nahoa a thumbs up for this. And we will have you back, assuming that you want to. Maybe we'll have you back and you can play a song or something for the audience, and we could talk about some of your apologetic questions. You and I can explore that, but keep me, and then I can let our audience kind of know what you're up to, because God's got his hand on your life. This is exciting stuff. So
Thank you.
don't take off yet. I'm going to end this in a second, but those who watch, make sure you hit subscribe. We've got some other really interesting interviews coming up. People like Wayne Grudem, Nancy Piercy, Lee Strobel doing behind the scenes interview about the people and books and experiences that have shaped their lives. And this Tuesday, A friend of mine I just met did his PhD dissertation on trans sport policy. How would opening up to trans athletes objectively affect sports? So we'll be interviewing him Tuesday. That is a hot, relevant topic. So make sure you join us this week coming up. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have an awesome weekend. And Nahoa, don't take off yet.
Thank you.